What if OnlyFans was never a website about creators at all? Because when most people hear OnlyFans, they think of scandal, adult content, and headlines. But if you strip away the brand, what you are left with is something way stranger. You are left with a machine with a tiny staff, gigantic cash flow, absurd profitability, and one terrifying weak point. A machine that does not really sell content. It sells urgency. It sells access. It sells the feeling that the next message, the next unlock, the next payment will finally satisfy you. Because the real engineering of OnlyFans may not be in video hosting or fancy code. The real engineering may be in turning human weakness into a payment system. The numbers are absolutely insane. For the year ending November 2024, OnlyFans operator reported about $7.3 billion in gross site volume, around $1.4 billion in revenue, and about $700 million in profit before tax. And this machine reportedly did that in an average monthly employee count of just 46. That's not a normal internet company. That is closer to a financial engine than a media business. And here is the trick. Most people think OnlyFans is built on subscriptions, monthly fee, log content, simple. But that's not the real monster. Non-subscription revenue is bigger than subscription revenue. So the real money is not the door fee. It is everything that happens after you walk in. Paid messages, unlocks, tiny moments of frictionless spending, one small purchase after another, repeated millions of times. A low monthly price gets you in, but emotional momentum empties your wallet. So if you want the dark hypothetical answer to the title, maybe this is it. Maybe OnlyFans was not really created to be a creator platform in the clean Silicon Valley sense. Maybe its real purpose, at least in economic terms, was to perfect high-frequency intimacy commerce. Intimacy as a recurring digital transaction. Human loneliness turned into user flow. Desire turned into revenue architecture. And once you see it that way, the whole thing starts looking less like a social media and more like a casino that learned how to whisper your name. That also explains why the company looks so weird from the outside. The staff count is tiny because a lot of labor is outsourced to the users themselves. Creators make the product, fans bring the money, agencies scale the interactions, chatters help run conversations at scale, keeping the emotional loop alive and the spending behavior going. The platform does not need a giant entertainment empire. It just needs the transactions to keep flowing. And that brings us to the most important part of the story. Payments, the money. This is the choke point. Because the company itself has identified payment infrastructure as a major business risk. A platform like this can survive bad headlines and culture war arguments. But it cannot survive if the banks, processors, acquirers or card networks decide it is too risky to touch. That's why 2021 mattered so much. OnlyFans announced that it would ban sexually explicit content, then reversed course days later because of pressure from banking partners and payment providers. In one instant, the platform people thought, which was driven by creators and culture, was revealed to be controlled by a deeper layer. Not the front end of the app, the rails, the money rails. Because if payment companies can force a site like this to change its core product, then maybe the real owners of the digital world are not the apps you see. Maybe it's the invisible systems underneath them, the networks that decide what can be bought, what can be sold, and which forms of human behavior are acceptable, as long as they are correctly packaged, verified, taxed and monitored. So here is the darker twist. What if OnlyFans is not a platform? What if it is a proof of concept? A proof that almost anything can be industrialized. If you can make it legible to payment infrastructure, even desire, even loneliness, even simulated intimacy, even shame. That would explain why the platform's engineering is not flashy in the normal tech sense. The hard part is not hosting the content. The hard part is making a controversial business processable by financial institutions. And if you want to go conspiracy brain for a second, here is the version that is actually interesting. Not that some secret room of villains sat down and said, let's build a website to destroy society. The darker version is that you don't need a mastermind at all. You just need incentives. You need a world where attention is currency, where loneliness is common, where creators are pushed to monetize themselves, where fans are trained by apps to spend in tiny frictionless bursts, and where the biggest winners are the people who own the toll booth in the middle. Once those conditions exist, society does not need to be attacked, it can be harvested. And that is where the idea of bread and circuses comes in. Rome kept people calm with spectacle. The modern version is way better. It is personalized, portable, always on. It lives in your pocket. It knows what you crave and how to turn that state into a purchase. Drugs do that. Gambling does that. Some social platforms do that, to be honest, majority of them. OnlyFans may simply be the intimacy version of the same formula. Different product, same economic logic, distract, drain, and then repeat. That's why the dividend story is so fascinating. The owner pulled about $700 million in dividends through $500 million paid for 2024, plus another $200 million declared after the reporting date. The group was also sitting on roughly $800 million in cash, while sale talks floated valuations from around $8 billion down to a later figure around nearly $6 billion including debt. And that is a strange picture. A wildly profitable machine, but one whose owner may also want cash out now. Maybe because he knows something very simple. Businesses like this look invincible until they do not. The money is huge, it is ginormous. But the permission structure is very fragile like a glass. If payment rules tighten, if regulators keep pushing, if tech failures keep making headlines, margins can shrink really fast. So maybe the smartest move is to extract while the gates are still open. And this is where people try to force in the Epstein angle. They see sex, power, money, elite circles, hidden systems, and they want one giant connecting thread. But the darker truth may be even worse. You don't need one giant secret network when an entire economic system already rewards monetized exploitation at scale. Epstein in that particular reading becomes less a direct link and more a symbol of how money and sex and power have always mixed at the top. OnlyFans is the platform A's version of a different idea. Not elite exploitation hidden in the shadows, but industrialized intimacy pushed through payment system, modernization system, and legal grey zones. Cleaner interface, same darkness, modernized, automated, wrapped in creator economy language. And then there is the final layer. Because the platform is adults only by policy, yet scrutiny around age checks, regulator pressure, and the risk of minors bypassing controls hangs over the business. So the nightmare is not that there is proven intent to target kids. The nightmare is that a giant machine optimized for monetizing attention will keep expanding towards the edge of what is allowed unless something stops it. That is what machines do under profit pressure. And in this business, the wall is not morality. The wall is payments, regulation, and reputational risk. So what is the insane engineering of OnlyFans? Maybe it built a billion-dollar system that barely looks like a company and behaves more like a toll road for digital desire. It transformed intimacy into a high-frequency payment product. It outsourced the labor, automated the spending psychology, centralized the cash transaction, and hid its fragility behind a simple interface. And its real purpose? In the darkest hypothetical version, not to destroy society through some cartoon villain master plan. Something way colder than that. To prove that modern society can be drained, distracted, and monetized through pleasure itself. That if you can wrap compulsion in convenience and route it through compliant financial infrastructure, people will call it innovation. And maybe that is the real conspiracy loophole. The system does not need to control everybody with fear. Sometimes it is easier to control them with temptation, the devil, the Satan, whatever you want to call it.